Hello, everybody, and welcome to the United Faithfuls podcast. Today, I'm joined by Taylor James. Taylor, how are you doing today, mate?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. And Connor Aspinall, what about you?
Yeah, I'm very good, mate. Very good.
So, jumping straight into things, I think we'll have a bit of a look back at the last two games since we spoke, starting with Sheffield. Connor, I'll come to you first. Let me get some general thoughts on that game.
Well, it was a very tough watch, especially in the first half. I thought we were terrible in the first half, especially dealing with the long ball, which is why I could see Harry Maguire playing. I thought he was the best player and definitely in the whole game. And then, to me, the attack and the midfield just seemed off in that game. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was Amrabat coming in and not many people had played with him in the position he was in. There was a lot of space, and then, as I said earlier, the long ball was a real problem in the first half. But we rectified it in the second half and got a good winner, I thought, in the end.
Maguire, do you reckon with Maguire against teams who do play those long balls but have that quicker striker than Sheffield might have, do you reckon he struggles there?
Yeah, I would say so. Especially, well, we brought him in as to be that aerial centre back, and then he seems to struggle sometimes at high ball. But then, especially at times when we try and play a higher line against teams like Copenhagen and so on, they've got some speed going forward is a real problem for him. But to be fair, in the last couple of games, I'd definitely say he's been our most important player.
His main issue really is just getting caught out, isn't it? I think he's okay when the striker's in front of him, he's pretty comfortable. And that's the situation we've been in the last couple of games. But as soon as I say a ball over the top or he overcommits and he's got to run back, then we're in trouble. But yeah, I agree that he's been top class the last couple of games.
What about on the ball, though? Is there don't want to say is there a future for him, but is he good enough in that sense?
Yeah. So when you watch Maguire, he's got that, especially when he's playing right centre-back, he's got that switch to the left winger. He gets that perfect pretty much every single time. He's really good at that. And it's really good at making space. So there's definitely a way to utilise that. But it's the short passing under pressure against a high press that still concerns me. And I think with Onana in goal, it's more comfortable because De Gea last season was obviously much less confident on the ball. But I'm still not 100% convinced by his playing out the back.
And then Connor, another player who's been very heavily scrutinised in his United career is Scott McTominay. We were saying before the call he didn't play well against Copenhagen, but then in the last 3 games he has scored 3 goals. In that, I suppose, higher role, can you see that working, especially with Mount not being that midfield solution we expected?
Watching him in that high role against Copenhagen on Tuesday, I would say if we're going to take that into Premier League games, especially the one that's coming up on Sunday, I can't say we can go with that in terms of in a sustainable way. That's going to work every game. I think at the moment what we've done is we've sort of scrapped any principle we had last season and are just trying to scrape through games and pick up quite ugly results. So that's obviously why he's in the team at the minute. But I don't think it's right to keep picking him on the basis that he's nicking a goal, because he's now cost us 2 penalties in the last 2 games. It could have cost us some important points.
For Ten Hag, what is the sort of plan? Like you said, we sort of scrapped all principles we had last season. What do you reckon what are we trying to do on the pitch? Because to be honest, I don't actually know.
For me, obviously, what I think we're relying on is, unfortunately, what we've been relying on for the last couple of years, especially under Ollie, it was very prevalent, was the counter-attack. Every time we can play against a team on the counter-attack, we seem to thrive. But when it comes to controlling the game, we struggle with that. And obviously the team selection on Tuesday didn't help, because if you're trying to control a game, Scott McTominay's not your player for that, because he's not going to do that. Because the amount of passes he completes from a midfield position isn't good enough, really, if you're going to control a game. And at the minute, we just seem to be going through the motions. So I don't know why we've sort of gone away from what we had last season. It might be injuries, losing Martinez and whatnot, but you can't keep sort of strolling through games. Eventually, we're going to have to try and put something in to win games more comfortably.
I mean, Taylor, for that midfield, what's the best midfield for Man United right now, do you reckon?
That's a good question. I think obviously the first name on the team sheet is still Bruno Fernandes for me. He's had a couple off performances, but he can still win games by himself. And then to support him, you would need someone who can anchor the midfield, and that was Casemiro last year. I'm not sure if he can do that this year, especially not with Mason Mount in the midfield too.
Do you then start looking at maybe a double pivot of Amrabat and Casemiro if Casemiro can't do it on his own?
Yeah. I think that's probably the way to go, but then I'm worried about progression out of the back. Amrabat seems comfortable on the ball, but more comfortable with short passes, as just holding onto the ball, not taking many risks, which isn't an issue. But then you would need someone with him who can move the ball forward. I think everyone knows Erik ten Hag wanted Frenkie de Jong. And he would be the one who could take the ball and move it forward. But none of his signings have that profile. He hasn't made anyone close to Frenkie de Jong yet. So, to be honest, I don't know what our best midfield is. I think we still need a couple more signings.
Do you think, Connor, that was the whole idea behind the Mason Mount signing, to have that, not I don't want to say Frenkie de Jong profile, but someone who can, confidently carry the ball forward?
Yeah, I think that was the whole reason we signed him, but I still don't feel like that has ever been Mason Mount's position, if I'm honest. I don't really recall him playing too many games there for Chelsea. For me, what we needed was a specialist number 8 who could take the ball off the back four and drive it forward just like Frenkie de Jong does, and that's obviously why he earmarked him as the signing. Casemiro isn't that player, and I don't think Mason Mount's that player. So for me, it was a bit odd that we didn't go for a specialist number 8, and we sort of trying to shoehorn Mount into that midfield. If we're going to play a midfield of Bruno and Mount, we need a bit more mobility behind them at the base, and obviously Casemiro this season hasn't been able to provide that. Last season we had Eriksen, who was able to take the ball off the back four and drive it forward. So I would like to see Eriksen get more minutes, if I'm honest, because of how well he played on Tuesday.
Yeah, it was a good point. I sort of Eriksen went over my head a bit there. Where is his best position for United? Because I suppose in his career he's been better in that more 10 role, but then I think we can all agree we don't want to see Bruno on that right wing. Is Eriksen and Amrabat maybe an option?
Eriksen played with McTominay on Tuesday, and he played really well. So I could imagine him playing alongside Amrabat, and that would work, because we do need to have that creativity from deep. Otherwise, we're not going to have any at all. Because watching Bruno in the first half against Copenhagen from the 8, it just didn't work because it's too many long passes, and we can't seem to control the game. When Eriksen came on, we gained that control back. So if we need to control games and try and break teams down, I think Eriksen's the player to do that.
And then moving away from the system itself, I think over the past few years, we've relied a lot on big individual moments. The last few games we had McTominay scoring twice against Brentford, Dalot scoring against Sheffield, and then that Onana save yesterday. Is that, I've always wondered, is that indicative of a good side that has those good quality players to snatch those games when we probably shouldn't win them? Or is that just sort of sweeping problems under the rug?
Yeah, I don't think that's sustainable, to be honest. You need your strikers to be the ones who score goals. And that's not to say that I don't like Højlund. I think everyone who's watched him, I've been impressed pretty much every single game. He's not getting the right balls into him, and whether that's Rashford's issue or Anthony's issue or Fernandez's issue, he needs to get the service, or else we're just, as you say, going to be relying on defenders and midfielders to score goals, and that we can't go through a whole season.
Is there more Højlund can do that?
To be honest, most of the chances he's received, he's finished them. I think I do think it's tough for Rashford to go from scoring 40-odd goals in a season almost to suddenly being told, right, you're not the goal scorer anymore. You've got to create for this guy. That's not an easy situation for him, but it's one that he just has to understand that that's what it's going to be from now on. And he needs to improve that side to his game.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of his game recently has been that hold-up play. A lot of the time we're playing those long balls out from Onana, and Onana is a player who I'd like to talk about. He made that penalty save. Obviously, is that how needed and how important was that for him, Connor?
Oh, that just felt like hopefully it's his turning point for United, because that just felt like one of the moments that he needed because of the start. He's had a really difficult start to his career. I think everyone knows that. It's obviously been difficult for him. Every game feels like a different back four, which is never easy for a keeper to bed in. But that moment was, obviously everyone had laid the blame at his feet, rightly so, for the first two games, the mistake against Bayern and when Casemiro got sent off against Galatasaray. And then, funnily enough, he wins us the game in the third game. So thankfully he turned it round, and hopefully this can be the turning point for him.
I think it even shows that, like, to himself, that he can make saves. Because I don't think the distribution was ever that much of a problem with him. Obviously, there's every now and then he'll put a long ball out of play, but I think that's kind of expected. Yeah, I mean, Taylor, any additional thoughts?
Well, I was saying last week that I think he's a sort of player that he's got a very confident look about him. But I don't think he was. I think that was all a facade for him to be confident. I don't see how he could have been confident after the last few games. But like you said, it just showed to him that he can make saves, that he is a good keeper, and it's probably the most important thing for him to know that out of anyone else.
You talk about confidence there. Is United's issue not just Onana, but the team as a whole? I mean, look, we have a lot of good individual players. You look at United's team on paper, and we should be doing a lot better than we are. Is the problem psychological for the whole team, or is there more of a tactical basis to it, Connor?
For me, it feels like a culmination of everything at the moment. Obviously, like I said earlier, I think we've scrapped any sort of principle as we had last season, which feels weird to do. We've gone for this more pressing style this season, which we didn't really use last season. And for me, the press is a bit disjointed at the moment. It feels like one person's going and then the whole team aren't going with him. So it's just a bit of a half-hearted press, and every team seems to play through that. But then you've also got the psychological aspect where we saw last season at times with the heavy defeats, and we've seen it already this season, where as soon as a moment goes against this team, it seems to completely go out the window, the game plan or whatever we were trying to do beforehand, and we're playing on sort of, I don't really know, sort of just present in the game, but we're not doing the right things, then we end up losing the game because we've lost all sort of composure.
What do you reckon the difference is between a few years ago under Ollie, where we were quite bad at points, but then we had that comeback in us, and then now? Because, well, yeah, what's that about?
It feels like, I don't know whether Ollie was able to instill any massive belief into the team. They showed it at times. It feels like a lack of belief at the moment and a lack of cohesion within the team. They showed, obviously, after Onana made that save on Tuesday night, there was a real show of unity there as the players celebrated with him. We've obviously had the two goals against Brentford as well. So hopefully they can show some belief. They've shown at times that they can do that. We've had Garnacho last season, the winner he had. Obviously, his club's it's obviously very famous for its comebacks as well. So hopefully, we don't really want to be in too many games where we're having to come back from behind, rather just sort of win the game 2 or 3-0. But as long as there's belief in the team, then we can always go for those late goals.
And it would be, I think it would go amiss to not talk about the Man City game on Sunday, right? I don't want to be pessimistic. I'm really trying to keep some hope about it. But Taylor, how are you feeling ahead of that?
3-0 win, easy. No, I'm joking. After struggling against Sheffield United and Copenhagen, I'm not feeling good. But it is the sort of game where teams can just pull it out of the bag. You know, it's the game where you've got to step up, and sometimes that's what a team needs. We showed it last season after the 4-0 against Brentford. What was it? Was Liverpool the game straight after that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, a tough game where we had to step up, and we won that. So obviously on paper, looking at how the teams are playing, we're massively the underdogs. But I wouldn't say never.
I mean, I talk about comebacks, and to be fair, I've just sort of realised we had that comeback against Brentford. Against City, the occasion of it surely makes the players go, look, like let's not take the mick here.
Yeah.
Do you think that it's a weird one, really? Because against City, like you'd look at the games last season, Liverpool 7-0. That's the type of game where you go, we should be up for that. How much has changed since that moment against Liverpool, Connor? And do you reckon we have that mentality to go out to go? We're at home as well. Do you reckon we can come out fighting there?
I would give us more of a chance at our place than I would at the Etihad. I obviously remember the Etihad result from last season. That was 6-3 in the end. So it feels like
it was a fortunate 6-3 as well.
Yeah, it should have been way more than 6-3. So any away game against the top teams, I can't remember the last time we beat a top team away from home. If I'm honest with you, so away from home, it seems to be a bit more of a struggle than it does at home. Obviously, the home form as well from last season's gone with the 2 losses we've had at home this year in the league anyway. And then, but playing City at home, it's one of them games where we're either going to get taken apart or we're going to somehow scrap a 1-0 win. It feels like one of them games. And I said earlier, we rely on that counter-attack, and they are one of the perfect teams to counter-attack against.
I remember last season Martinez doing all right against Haaland, but then on Sunday, obviously Martinez is out. How can Maguire and Varane cope with him, Taylor?
Well, you say Martinez, but I remember in the FA Cup final last year, obviously we got beat. Haaland didn't have a sniff. He didn't do a thing. And that was Varane and Shaw, wasn't it?
That was Lindelof and Varane that game.
Oh, Lindelof and Varane, sorry. But Varane had the job of taking Haaland, and he silenced him. So it's very possible to take Haaland out of the game. Obviously, the issue is that he only needs 1 touch to score. But I do have confidence that if the midfield does their job, the 2 centre-backs can deal with him.
Do we sort of just have to sit in that low block, commit to a counter-attack, and hope Rashford can pull something out of the bag, Connor?
Yeah, I think for me, Amrabat and Casemiro has to be the midfield on Sunday. We have to get a bit more steel in there rather than being... If we play as expansive as we have been, we're going to get taken apart, because you give them any sort of space and leave your fullbacks one-on-one, you're in a lot of trouble. There's obviously going to need to be a lot of defence. I can see Bruno playing out wide on Sunday as well, because he played him out wide last year as well in the home fixture, I remember, and he actually played really well. In terms of defensively, I can see him playing. And then Rashford struggled at times, as he's been heavily criticised for, as in not helping out his fullback and sort of wandering around. So he needs to be on it as well defensively. But it's very important, and what will help is having Højlund, because whenever the ball does go and we win it back, he's got to hold it up and then we can get around him. So I'd imagine we're going to play the very similar way to what we've played against City a lot of times in the past couple of years.
And then the game straight after that is Newcastle at home in the Cup on Wednesday, I believe. How strong, Taylor, do we go for that game? Because obviously it's probably our best chance for silverware. But I think in the next... Well, it's the first of 4 games in 11 days, I believe. How do you balance going with a strong lineup, trying to win the game, but also sort of trying to manage the players a bit more?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Like you say, it is our best chance at silverware. Man City are already out of the Carabao Cup. But do you prioritise Champions League qualification over that? Which is I think he will go for a strong team. Ten Hag doesn't. He's not really the type to go out for a weak team in any game, really, let alone a game of this magnitude. Yeah, and I think that's the right choice, to be honest, because, like you say, it is our best chance at silverware, and even though we won it last year and it wouldn't really be progress, it is a good step to be winning consecutive trophies. And
then, so if you were the manager and it comes to later in the tournament where we are having to either field a good side in either the Premier League or the Carabao Cup, do you go for the Carabao Cup?
Well, it depends where we are in the Premier League. I think I would rather, after winning the Carabao Cup last year, I would rather qualify for Champions League. I'd rather get top 4 or top 5, this year. But if we're, comfortably in the top 5, which I can't see that happening, then I think he will go all out for the Carabao Cup. But if it's tough, I'd say Premier League.
Connor, is that 5th spot probably getting Champions League a bit of a godsend for us? Is that our saving grace?
Yeah, and I would say I can't. Like Taylor said, I can't see us getting that, because if you look at that top 4 at the moment, those 4 teams are quite comfortably the best teams in the league at the minute, and we're still way away from that. The only thing I would say that's helping us is that competitiveness at the top. We're somehow only 8 points off the top of the league, and it feels like we've hardly won a game this season. So, that competitiveness at the top of the league could help us. And obviously got Newcastle now as well, who've obviously got in that game next week, who have found form in the league. So they're obviously going to be in there as well. Villa look really good. Brighton will be in and around it, I would have thought, if Chelsea can pick it up as well. So you're also relying on a lot of other teams to drop off, as well as us we need to heavily improve to make that top 5.
I think a big part of that is beating the smaller teams, because look, we struggle against most teams we play. I think that's almost expected now against top sides. But then when it comes to the Sheffields and the Brentfords and I don't know, maybe even the Lutons in a few weeks' time, what's the problem? Why are we not putting more past them?
I don't really know what. Obviously, the problem is when those teams come to Old Trafford like Palace did a few weeks ago. If you can sort of sit in that low block and soak up pressure, we're a lot easier to play against on the counter attack than we have been for a while, because there seems to be so much space when that ball breaks, and Palace did that perfectly in that game. So those smaller teams, and it doesn't feel like there's a fear when they play against us anymore, especially it wasn't against Sheffield United, because they've shown that you can rough and tumble this team. So if there is that evidence you can do that, teams are going to set up in a way where they can do that and they can exploit the weaknesses we have.
And then Taylor, Connor mentions that low block there and teams being able to play that against us. We've had this problem for a long time now, and we've had Bruno Fernandes come in, we've had Eriksen, we've had Mason Mount, and even Anthony, Sancho, creative players there who you bring in to be creative and to help break down that low block, and we've still not been able to do it. What's happened?
Well, this is the frustrating thing about United, because as fans, we've said the issues are Maguire, McTominay, Fred, De Gea, and they've all gone out the team. They've all been replaced, and we're still not winning. We're still not beating these teams. So, it's really hard to say what the issue is. I think if it's a mentality thing, then I'd be really disappointed in the team as a whole, because there's no reason you shouldn't be desperate to win every game and prove a point, especially when we're so desperate to get back anywhere near the top. This should be the part where they're most motivated, but I don't know.
Connor, how do you get that hunger back in the squad?
I think through winning games. Obviously, that's what he's trying to do now. I remember when we did it last year, when we lost to Brentford and then beat Liverpool, and on that really nice run before the international break where we beat Arsenal as well, won 4 or 5 games in a row. We weren't great in those games. We built wins, and we won 4 or 5 in a row, and then we built that sort of that confidence where we could go and beat teams. That's what I think he's trying to do now, is where obviously winning breeds confidence, and if we're going to keep losing games, it's not going to get us anywhere. So somehow it doesn't feel like we've won 3 games in a row, but we have. It feels like some of the scrappiest 3 games in a row I've watched us play in a long time. Sometimes those games can turn your season around, though, and this game on Sunday can do that. But I don't want to keep saying this could turn the season around, because sooner or later it does need to turn around. So, but that does come from the manager. So obviously, when there is that lack of mentality, you've got to look towards him. So as long as he can bring that into the team, we should, and especially those away games against the top teams, that record heavily needs to improve if we're going to get anywhere fast.
Our next 5 games. So obviously we've spoken about City and Newcastle. Then we've got Fulham, Copenhagen again, and Luton. Let's talk about the Fulham and Luton games. Fulham against Tottenham the other night, their defence looked poor, quite poor. And then Luton, obviously one of the lower. What am I trying to say? Teams lower in the league. Is this our chance to finally go out, put a few past them, and show what we're about, Taylor?
Well, I think when you say Fulham's defence is poor, it could have just been Spurs playing well. That is a possibility, that they just made them look poor, and we'll come up against them, and they'll, as normally happens against us, they'll turn into prime 2000 Italy, and be impossible to break down. But they're not tough games. They shouldn't be for Man United. Fulham and Luton, they should be guaranteed 6 points. But these days, nothing's guaranteed. But a win against City, if it does happen, that should be the turning point. If that's not the turning point, then I don't know what is.
And then the game in between those two is that Copenhagen game. That's out of Copenhagen, then Galatasaray away, and then Bayern at home. That Copenhagen game is the one where we need to win to really have a chance to stay in the Champions League. Connor, do you think we progress to that next stage?
I think obviously after the win on Tuesday, we have to go to Copenhagen and win now. I would say that because if you look at who Galatasaray have got that night, they've got Bayern away, which I can't really see them winning because that will qualify Bayern if they win that game. So that one of those two games has to be a win, whether it's Galatasaray or Copenhagen. If you can win both of them, then you're in a really good position going into that Bayern game. You've virtually qualified at that point. So I think that Galatasaray game out of the two Copenhagen games is the tougher one because that is a very, very difficult place to go and win. They showed that on Tuesday night when they played Bayern. But the Copenhagen one has to be a win because, if you look in terms of quality of the two teams, that has to be, especially if we go and beat, Man City and then we get something against Newcastle and progress and then beat Fulham, you've suddenly won 5 or 6 games in a row there and you're going into a game with a lot of confidence. So in order to progress, we definitely need to win one of the next two.
I've just got a notification on my phone about Alejandro Garnacho, who could face disciplinary action over a social media post he put out after the game against Copenhagen. Without going into, just came out now from Tyrone Marshall at the Manchester Evening News. Just talking about Garnacho because I think that is a good talking point. What's his long-term role at United, do you think? Is he going to be the one who eventually, when Rashford hasn't put in a good performance in quite a while, is he going to replace him in the first team? Or does it get to a point where he is just that substitute option? Because they both only seem to be able to play on that left wing.
I've just seen what Garnacho actually posted.
Yeah, I just see it as well. Yeah, well, okay. I thought, obviously, it's bad time in this news and whatever he has posted is shocking, but obviously he was really good. I thought when he came on Tuesday, and he was much more effective than Rashford was in the 70, 80 minutes he played on the left. And for me, Garnacho has been very good every time he's come on this season. I don't know why he's not got more minutes because he's been the more effective player off the left. But we definitely need to balance it out because we seem quite top heavy at the moment. Like whether we seem to attack a lot down the right on Tuesday night, and then we'd seem to attack a lot down the left against Sheffield United. So it seems like one game we're favouring one side of the pitch and another game we're favouring the other.
Taylor? Anything to on Garnacho? Look, I mean, is there the possibility of him playing on that right wing? Or do you think we just need to commit to him being a left winger and then just sort of try and work him in that way?
Well, I don't see any harm in trying him on the right wing, I would say, because we've got so many. It seems to always be the case when we buy a winger that they prefer the left. But obviously only one person can play on the left. And even though his form hasn't been great, Rashford still is the best player we have on the left wing. So I would trial him out on the right. If it really isn't working at all, then his substitute appearances are where he's most effective. Bring him on in the 60th minute against a weak defence, and he tears them apart. But I also think, Anthony isn't phenomenal by any means. It wouldn't be out of this world. So even if Garnacho isn't playing to the top of his ability, but for him to be performing better than Anthony, I could see that happening.
How long do you stick with Anthony before you start experimenting?
I would have started experimenting a while ago.
What would you do? Who would you give a go?
Well, before the Sancho situation, I was a big advocate of him going into that right wing position. Pellistri, when he's been there, he's done okay. I think if you give him more of a run in the team, let him really get used to Premier League football, then
what about Ahmad when he comes back?
He could do better. Yeah, I forgot about Ahmad. Yeah, you're right.
When is he back actually?
He's back in training, so whenever he's match
He is,
fit,
okay.
so, yeah.
Oh yeah,
There you go.
because he massively impressed me. I obviously I only watched a few highlights. I watched a couple games of Sunderland, but when I watched him, I was really, really impressed.
Coming back to that City game, actually, who is, with Malacia back in training, who's our best left back option?
Well, I think that has to be Reguilon, because I feel like Reguilon's the only fullback we have at the moment. Obviously, watching Lindelof in those couple of games that he did play, it felt sorry for him, because it's not his position. You can't judge him on that, because it's not where he plays. So I would say, although Reguilon did look quite rusty on Tuesday night, he's still the only natural sided left back we do have. So I would say he's sort of got to play. He'll have a big role as well, I would have thought, in that game, because how much City like to use their wide players. So I would say he would have to play on Sunday.
Do you reckon he
What
stays
about
in there
when-
when Malacia's fit?
I would say once Malacia's fit, I would say he'll come back in, just because of, obviously, Ten Hag brought him in. Ten Hag likes him, saw him when he tried to sign him at Ajax as well. And I thought Malacia played quite well last season whenever he did come in. So I would imagine he'd slot straight back in.
And then on the other side, we have Diogo Dalot, who, for me, has been really good in the last few games, even before he scored against Sheffield. I think against Brentford, he was pretty standout from memory. How does he cope with Doku? Because if he does start, obviously, because City, when we play City, they don't, in the last few games, they haven't had that quick, direct winger. I think the last one they had, unless I'm forgetting someone obvious, is Sterling, back when he was at the club. How does Dalot sort of keep him quiet? Because it's a different threat than we're used to.
I think that's a weakness of Dalot's, to be honest. Direct, tricky wingers. I remember in the Carabao Cup final last year, he was really struggling with St. Maximin. And Wan-Bissaka came in and just shut him down completely. But obviously, we don't have Wan-Bissaka for the Sunday fixture. So he's just going to have to be smarter, more mature, and just not take any risks, not get caught out, because Doku is very, very good at getting past his man. So he's just got to be on the very top of his defensive game.
Do you not think that impacts us a lot going forward, though? Because if Dalot's sort of sticking back, just focusing on Doku that whole game, you're going to have Reguilon on the left, who's presumably doing the same thing. And then if you're playing that Amrabat Casemiro midfield, then we might struggle there, Connor.
I'd say we'll be okay sort of defensively. In terms of trying to cause them a problem, we'll have a bit of an issue, because there won't be too much support from either fullback, and there won't be too many. Well, I say that, but Casemiro, every time I seem to watch him, seems to end up in the box every time we sort of go forward. So it feels like he's supposed to play as the holding midfielder, and he ends up in the box every time. So I would say that we will struggle to cause them a problem, unless Rashford's on his game and we can cause them a problem on the break with his speed. But in terms of the fullbacks, I'm not too worried about them defensively. I would say that they're both adequate defensively. They're not as good as Wan-Bissaka or Luke Shaw, but it's not ideal, the situation we've got. But it is what it is. So we've got to deal with that. But I'd imagine that both of them will start on Sunday.
With Rashford, we were saying earlier that he might be the sort of saving grace against City with his speed, but then he also doesn't do much defensive work, as we know. Is there an option for him to just go up top?
Well, I'd say that it depends on what sort of counter attack we want to play. Whether we want to play direct in terms of into Højlund and get around him, or whether we want to get going behind. If we want to go in behind, I think Højlund could do either of those roles, in fairness to him. But if we want to go in behind, Rashford's the guy to go in behind. If there's a lot of space, there's not many players quicker to get to a ball that's going in behind. And then if you take him out of the striking position, who do we then sort of put on the left? Does he put Bruno on the left, or put someone else on the left? So there's a lot of questions for him, which is causing him a headache, I would imagine. So unless we just go for a very similar lineup to what we have been going, and try and go toe to toe with City, but I can't see us doing that.
And then just finally, score predictions for that City game then. Taylor, we'll come to you first. What do you think? Let's try and be a bit optimistic.
I told you, 3-0.
3-0 to United, yeah?
No.
We'll leave it there. Taylor, 3-0 United. Connor, what do you think?
Okay, though.
I want to go with my heart or my head here. I'll probably go 2-0 Man City if I'm going to be realistic. But I'd love for us to win, obviously.
Yeah. Now, Taylor, what were you going to say?
My optimism would be a 1-1 draw. is my optimistic
1-1
response.
draw.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think most United fans would take that. And then what about the Newcastle game?
That I'm a bit more confident with. Especially if we, I think I said last week, if we were at St James's Park, I wouldn't be confident. But having the game at Old Trafford, I reckon we can get a 2-1 win.
Connor?
Well, obviously I watched their game last night and they weren't hugely impressive against Dortmund, and they've obviously lost Isak now. I don't know how long he's going to be out for, and obviously Tonali's had his ban today as well, so they're missing two really important players there. And I would imagine if United lose on Sunday, there's a real opportunity there to go and get back optimism again if they go and win on Wednesday. So I'd back United to win 2-1 as well.
Do you think this Champions League run but the Champions League fixtures that Newcastle have is playing a toll on them? Because even last night they were at home and they didn't look better than they didn't look as good as they normally can do at home.
I think
can we take advantage of it?
Yeah, I think it has to be playing a role. And I'd say that was the same with Aston Villa and Brighton. For those teams who've not been in Europe for some of them for a long time, they don't have the squads that other teams do to compete. So when they do, unfortunately, lose players through injury, they really do not have the backup. And I forgot about, Botman's missing as well, and he's been out for quite a while now. So they don't really have the quality replacement that other teams do.
Yeah. Well, everyone, thank you for listening and tuning into today's podcast. Let's hope we get that 3-0 win against City that Taylor has predicted for us. And we'll see you all next week. Have a good day.